All right. Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where in the world you happen to be. My name is Christopher Harrison, and this is Web Wednesday, the show where I bring on people that are much smarter than me to talk about cool things web dev. Now, one of the truly amazing things about JavaScript is the fact that you can really do almost anything it is that you might want with it. And I cannot remember what his name is, but he's he's some famous developer. I cannot remember what his name is. But anyway, he once said, I'm just making this quote just terrible now, but he once said that anything that can be written in JavaScript eventually will be. And I think that, there's at least a kernel of truth into that. And one of the things that you can actually do, as it turns out, with JavaScript is put together mixed reality. And I don't know about the rest of y'all, but at least for me, it's like, oh, wow, that's really cool and extremely powerful. So I'm really jazzed to be joined today by Ashwigu, who is a senior cloud advocate who's done an awful lot with mixed reality and just like other really cool things. So yeah, thanks for joining us.
Hi, Christopher. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So one of the things that I always love to do is to ask people how they got into the industry, because I don't know. I think like origin stories for developers, especially just considering the varied backgrounds that a lot of us have, are just always fascinating. So how is it that you got here?
That's a great question. And I do have a non-traditional way of coming into this development world and love to talk about it. I studied graphic design. It was a bachelor's of science, but it was in design. And I did scientific animations. And while I was doing that, I fell in love with 3D. I was doing these nanotechnologies and animating them. And then slowly, to be able to animate things, I slowly start to write scripts on the programs like Autodesk Maya or After Effects. And finally, I moved to California. Once I moved here, I saw that, I can actually be a developer. And one day I went to Autodesk, which I love the products. And then I realized, oh, I can work here. Um, and I went to a boot camp and, studied really hard. And I actually did get a job at Autodesk and worked there for 2 years and worked on the products that I love to use.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. And how did you find your way over to Microsoft?
Microsoft. So I was also a big web advocate all the time. I was working as a software engineer, but I became a Google developer expert in Angular
Mhm.
specifically and web technologies. And I get to meet a lot of people, and John Papa was one of them. And then lots of cool people started to work with him, and I felt jealous and came over as well.
That's great. That's great. I'm glad that you met a handful of really cool people and went, hey, I want to go work with them, and then came and joined us. That's absolutely fantastic. I love that. So, and I really love
Thank you.
sort of that non-traditional background of, hey, this is what I want to do, and then you went out, did a boot camp and found your way here. That I did something sort of similar, although it was kind of a more of a 2-year tech school thing rather than a boot camp. But that's great, and it's a fantastic message for anybody who's thinking, hey, I want to get into this. That yes, a boot camp is 100% a viable route, and then number two, for all of the gatekeepers in the world, that a boot camp is 100% a viable route.
That's true. And also, bootcamp doesn't give you a key to success also. I mean, you have to realize you do work really hard and you do learn a lot. Even before getting into the bootcamp, I think some of the questions that I got was easy, harder to get into the bootcamp than getting my first job. It's
That's interesting.
Yeah.
So, were they
But
just like on?
they did guide me to how to learn beforehand. They told me everything I need to learn, and then yeah, it was not very easy to get in, but it's a great experience. And believe it or not, my backgrounds have been helpful because I worked with 3D models and 3D software before. It was very easy for me to move on to 3D on the web as well.
That's fantastic, and that's sort of like a perfect segue. So thank you for setting me up like that. So let's sort of ask this question, because I hear an awful lot about like MR and VR and AR and all of these other TLAs of 2 or 3 letter abbreviations. So in a nutshell, what is MR, AR, VR? How do they relate to one another? Is there a difference? Like, what is all of this?
First of all, so sorry for making this super complicated. It's our fault. I mean, by us, I mean, most of the time it's the companies, right? Every company uses some different naming convention. Then it becomes very confusing after a while. So what we describe as, I will describe them all in once, I hope. So we are in the real world with the real objects, everything. So this is one end of the spectrum. And the other end of the spectrum is when everything is virtual, which means that you put on a headset, you don't see anything around you. The only thing that you see that is created 3D objects that are rendered with the software. So that is virtual reality, when you're totally immersed and don't have any connection with the outside world. And there are so many things in between. Some of them are, phone applications that we daily use, right? Snapchat was one of them. Any kind of filters, like visual filters. And now Google Maps has a great augmented reality capability feature, which shows like arrows on your own street, and you could see like which way you need to go. So, which is augmenting our reality. When I think of it, I think of like I'm adding to this reality, adding something. And what we call mixed reality at Microsoft is this whole range of things. Anything from adding something small to your environment to totally being immersed into a virtual world.
Okay. So mixed reality then is sort of the umbrella, then the all-encompassing term. My virtual
Yeah.
reality is I'm putting on those headphones, and now this is like literally all that I see and all that I'm interacting with. And that augmented reality is when I'm looking through something that's now like adding objects or arrows or other things that you mentioned that aren't actually there.
Exactly. And that's not all, unfortunately. So on the web, we have this device APIs called WebXR. And they used to be called WebVR because at the time we only had the virtual reality devices, and nobody thought about augmented reality glasses or phones having these capabilities. So after a while, when we realized that this is going to be a problem, we changed from WebVR to WebXR. X meaning any variable, which is we might end up with other realities that we don't know, we haven't discovered yet, but we would like to cover all of that with WebXR term on the web.
Okay, and besides, if you add the letter X to it, it just means that it's cooler. That's like I think how that works. So
exactly. And mysterious, obviously.
obviously.
Yeah.
Okay, so if like all of that then is all the different realities, how can trying to figure out which question it is that I want to ask here. What are some of the different tools then that I could use to start down this path? Like, is it something that I can use Unity and start like writing C# or what tools is it that I can start to use if I want to begin exploring this path?
That's a great question, and I have the opinionated version of my answer and not opinionated. So the opinionated one is use WebXR because web is cool. And also it has other advantages being free for everybody. But the most popular tools right now is Unity with C#. And they have the most developers because they're also coming from the game development world. And the other tools that are coming up are Unreal Engine, which I really like. It's also very much like Unity. It has a UI, but also you can write C++ code. And it has both of these tools now have node-based programming, which means that you have these boxes which represent some variables or other things, and then you can connect them together to write the code without having to worry about the syntax. And other than that, for mobile devices, you can write, Kotlin or Java for Android, or you can use iPhones or iOS devices, augmented reality capabilities using their tools as well. Swift, I think, yeah.
Oh, interesting. So iOS has its own APIs then for doing some form of mixed reality. Does Android do that
Yes.
as well?
Yes, and they have more naming convention, AR Core and AR Kit, and it's really hard for me to remember. Android is AR Core and iOS is AR Kit, so they're augmented reality capabilities.
Okay,
APIs.
good. Yeah, more names. That was exactly what I was hoping for here, because there wasn't enough.
That's what you need. But don't run away. It's so much easier when you start writing JavaScript. So the advantage of JavaScript is you can actually write code with something like React Native, or right now BabylonJS is one of the libraries who is working on their own native library. You can write JavaScript and deploy it onto any device. One thing that all of these devices have in common, and that's the only thing, is to have access to a browser. And one of the issues with all of these other tools compared to WebXR is that you have to go through their development process plus their app store, right? For Android, iOS, or Unity, Unreal, maybe on a Windows store. For web, you don't have any of those, which is a huge advantage. But on the other hand, on the web, we are missing some of the capabilities for now. And the reason is on the web, we take things slow. We want to make things very secure, and we don't want to break any of our APIs. Nobody's code will break, hopefully, once we decide. With Unreal Engine and Unity, there's no backward compatibility. Your code breaks every time, and things like that happen. So it's little hassle. They're great tools, but you have to know these trade-offs.
Okay. Trying to fix your screen here real quick. It went sideways on me. Give me 1 second here. Let me
No worries.
try and see if I can't get this to refresh itself. Ah, there we go. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Yep. All right, we're back.
Here I am. Yay.
Much better. Cool. So, you highlight, I think, one of the biggest things about just web development in general is that this is pretty much as close as we can get to a write once run anywhere. That yes, obviously there's still different browser challenges and so forth that different browsers will do different things. But to a certain extent, a lot of that does seem to have either been smoothed out, or if nothing else, that the frameworks will then handle that for us. So as long as I'm using a framework, then typically it's going to then manage all of those browser issues. And then you also highlight another real big part is that if it's just a website, then I don't need to worry about publishing out to the store and going through that approval process, which from everything that I've heard can really be a challenge.
Yes. Currently, there's a big lawsuit that's happening because iOS, Apple and Google decided to take off Unreal Engine's biggest game from their store, and they even threatened to take away all of their development rights for all of the individual developers, right? So no one can write anything for iOS or iPad. So that's tough. There's a economical incentive there too.
That's crazy. Yikes.
Yeah.
Okay, so I want to transition then into a bit of Babylon and start to look at it. I do need to highlight really quick here, though, that Venetius wanted to thank you for your front end masters workshop that had introduced him
Oh, thanks.
to WebXR. So yeah, so he says thank you. And then Huey has an interesting question, which is, where do you see VR, MR, AR impacting digital access for people with disabilities? Do you feel or what do you feel is the biggest barrier to making these technologies more accessible?
I love this question. Thank you so much for asking. There's there's actually so many barriers, but there's also so many great applications in terms of accessibility. For example, one of the tools is augmented reality glasses, HoloLens by Microsoft, which means that you can put it on, and then we can detect everything in your environment, where the wall is, where you have something in front of you, and if you are visually impaired, this is a very helpful information. One of the researchers that are working on an application similar to that was trying to solve a problem which most able people don't even think about, how to find bus stops. So every city has a different bus stop label. Sometimes they're behind a tree, and you have to be able to help someone find the bus stop and walk towards it if they don't see. So there are great applications like that, because augmented reality is environment aware, and it's available on your mobile devices too, which is great. But the problem that we are running into, so I am also a co-chair at WebXR Immersive Web working group. So we've been discussing about this, and this is the thing that we are getting stuck most of the time, is that WebXR device API doesn't give you anything to render anything. So basically we are saying this, you have access to these sensors and you can do these kind of things, but it's up to the developer to create these accessibility tools. And we are not able to define that as the working group, which makes me very sad. Because that means that there's one more step to do, and we should have a tool to make it very easy for everybody. So one thing that is going to help is that in your WebXR immersive experiences are happening on a canvas, which acts very differently than any other HTML elements, also SVG. So one thing that we can do is to be able to add some HTML elements from regular HTML elements, for example, a div or anything else, as a flat layer on top of what you're seeing. That would, I think, be really helpful, because then we can put tags and things like that, so it will be a little bit easier for accessibility. In terms of other experiences, so the other challenge is that we have to take into consideration of all of the environment that you are in. If you are wearing a VR headset, we are assuming that this is your height, and maybe you are standing up. But if you don't have a way of moving, or you're not standing up, we have to make sure that the whole thing is adjusted according to you. And
Right.
currently, they're all up to the developers, unfortunately. But we do have a few ways, like we can transport with some clicks instead of going to places, but a lot falls into the developer to create more inclusive applications.
Okay. So so at least for right now, it very much then kind of falls onto the developer. But it sounds like there's at least some level of progress that's being made.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Hopefully. And one of the other things is that while trying to make things more accessible, we also don't want to give so much information about the user. For example,
Right.
hand interaction is a thing in augmented reality, right? But we don't want to tell your application that I have 3 fingers or 5 fingers, because that's personal information and you don't want to give that away. So how do you adjust all of the applications according to that is the challenge.
Right. That makes complete sense. Somebody else, Armanx, asked a question about headsets. Is, you know, so right now, especially when you're talking about true virtual reality, you've got kind of that big bulky headset. Is are we making progress towards something that's going to be a bit easier to wear and easier to manage, not as obtrusive, or is maybe instead kind of doing it through your phone to avoid that and going down that mixed reality, that augmented reality path? Do you think going to then be a bit more of a way around the challenges with kind of that big bulky headset?
Yes. Phones are absolutely great, I think. It's in everybody's hand, and most of the time, most people don't even think that they're using an mixed reality application, right? Like Snapchat, like who thought about it? No, I mean, I didn't personally. There's just so many applications we don't even think about, and it makes life so much easier, and I love it. And it makes my life easier too, because then I can't say, everybody should get a headset, but everybody has a phone, so it's much easier for me to teach. In terms of headsets, the technology is dependent on, the chips, like how fast we can cool things, how big of a computer you can put into a small thing, and it's developing rapidly, but it's slowly at the same time. And currently, the furthest we came is, I think, Hololens and also the Oculus VR headsets became much cheaper compared to other headsets, and it doesn't require you to have another computer. That was the case, that you needed to have a very strong computer. We don't have to do that. So that's the huge for VR. And for AR, HoloLens, the new one, I can actually show one.
Yeah, perfect.
So this, for Oculus, this is it, and you don't need a computer, you don't need any cable, and you can just wear this on an airplane, and it will work, which is huge. There's a computer in it. That's very nice. And this is HoloLens, so as you can see, it's transparent. Mm-hmm. The good thing about this is that, if people are working, they can actually attach this to something else, which is nice. And then you can do this, which is humongous for me, because while you're developing, trying to put on a headset is so annoying. The good part is I can just wear it, and then I can just turn it on and keep typing and doing something else, and then put it back on, which is amazing. But we do know that, Apple is working on one, and I'm sure over time it's going to get smaller and smaller.
Okay. And a real quick question on the HoloLens. Do you know off the top of your head how heavy it is? Like I've worn one, and amazingly, I've actually only worn one once, and it felt like relatively comfortable is about the best way that I would describe it.
Well, they actually, I can't remember. Was it 3 pounds? There are 2 HoloLenses. This is version 2. And everyone thinks that this version is so much lighter, but they actually weigh almost the same. And the reason is that the weight is distributed evenly to the front and to the back. So it's, a little bit more comfortable wear.
Okay.
But yeah.
All right.
I can wear it for extended time.
Okay. All right. That's good to know. That's good to know. So let's get into BabylonJS then. So what is BabylonJS?
So BabylonJS is a 3D rendering engine, and which you can create anything, including 3D games on the web or 2D ones as well. So it's a 3D game engine, but you can render 2D as well. And one of the use cases for it is actually now PowerPoint. PowerPoint is using BabylonJS to render 3D stuff, and you can have animations and everything else, which is really, really
Huh.
cool.
Today I learned.
Yeah. There are multiple libraries. This is one, A-Frame is one, and there are a few others, ARJS. Yeah, BabylonJS and 3JS are two of the very popular ones.
Okay. Cool. Do you want to go ahead and show off how BabylonJS looks? I know that you've got a demo. Would love to see it.
Sure. Do I need to share?
Nope, I've got it on my side.
Great.
Yep.
So everyone who wants to follow along AKMS Mixed Reality Curriculum has some information about Unity and also WebXR. So we talked about a lot of the concepts, and I'm going to talk to you about BabylonJS. Let's show it off a little bit. So this is their website, and it's an open source project supported by Microsoft, and they have great community and they have great tools. And one really cool thing is that they have the documentation, and they also have this thing called Playground, which means that you can write things, change things on your browser, and you don't have to go anywhere, which is really nice. But when you need to, you can download the file that you're creating here with an HTML, and then use that as well. And there are two options for BabylonJS: TypeScript or JavaScript. It is written in TypeScript, and I'm a huge fan, so I do recommend using that. And also it has some of the debugging tools here. So it tells us about what kind of nodes are there. There's a camera, there's a ground, which is this one, light, sphere, and the material. So you can have more information here as well, which is really nice. And I have a great video on the WebXR YouTube channel that talks more about the what it is. And I would like to give you some general, idea of the concepts. So to create a 3D scene is almost, it's a little bit more like a production design. You need a scene, you need a camera, and you need some lights, and also some actors, which are objects. So the objects are also composed of geometry and material, and we call them together as mesh. So on the left side, you see there's the material of it. So it defines how the light reflects off of it. And on the right side, that's the geometry that defines the shape of it. And okay, so let's look at the examples on the playground. And you can see it's we are creating a camera. In this case, creating a hemispheric light and creating a box. So this is also one of the cool things about TypeScript, right? When I hover over it, we have the type information, which means that I know when creating a box what kind of arguments I need to give, like their size, width, and anytime you see a question mark, that means that there's that's a optional variable. So first thing is string name, and then the options that you need to give.
Okay.
And then we have the camera. We define like how much we see on different axes. So beta and alpha defines like how big is my camera. lens is open in one way or the other. And there are different kinds of lights, like spotlights or ambient lights. Use the default lights for now. Don't worry too much about it. And I have some 3D exercise for you. Okay. And one other thing that I wanted to show you is how easy it is to load a model. There are different kinds of 3D models, and they have different loaders. Some of the most popular ones are GLB and OBJ, and you can create or find these kind of 3D models from either free resources out there or created using tools like Blender or Autodesk Maya or 3ds Max. BabylonJS accepts a lot of the formats, which is great, but they also have their own formats in terms of models, which puts together the material and the model together, because the model might have multiple objects. If you think of a car, for example, it has tires and it has other things, and then they have to move together, but they also have different textures and materials. I'm rushing through it because we have limited time, but please feel free to stop me for any questions.
No, that actually that makes a fair bit of sense. That I remember I played around a little bit with the web canvas years and years and years ago, and I remember a lot of the kind of those same concepts of that you've got lighting, that you can choose where it is that you want the camera to be, and so forth. So this seems like, especially if you already have some level of experience maybe doing some 3D work in the past, that making the move over to this would feel relatively natural.
Yes, I think so, because you know, on the web we build forms and we have HTML, but the canvas itself is a totally different beast, and it doesn't act the same way as the rest of the HTML. So sometimes people feel weird about it, and you can create your scene and then create everything, but forget to put a light, and then everything will be dark and you won't be able to see anything. And it's really hard to debug that if you don't know that you're missing that.
Right. That's funny.
Yeah, so that's why I like to go over those basic concepts really fast, because yeah, if you're not seeing something, you might not have the object might not have material, or you know, all of those things can happen.
Okay.
So here I have the example of how easy it is to import some mesh. The BabylonJS has a scene loader, and then you can import the whole mesh, or even a whole scene is easily, you can able to download it. So in this case, we are creating two of them, and then you can, like every object in Babylon, it requires you to create a name. If not, you give a empty string as the name. So that makes it easy for us to be able to call that object later on. And as you can see, house one is positioned on y-axis, and let's make this 5 and run it. It goes up on the y-axis.
Are you running it on a different screen? Because right now I'm just seeing the browser window, and so I can see the code, but I'm not. Yeah.
It is the same browser, but maybe it's not showing the tabs. So I'll stop and do it again.
Yeah.
Oh.
We'll go ahead and do that. I'm gonna take a look at.
Okay. Hopefully Yes.
Ah, there we go. Okay, give me 1 second to get this added in. While I'm getting this added in, let me ask a real quick question here from Proot Home, who asks if you think that like haptics physical feedback is going to be incorporated into VR, MR, and maybe like some level of voice recognition.
Mm-hmm. HoloLens, for example, comes with voice recognition out of the box. So you can start using it just using voice commands, which is really helpful in some cases. And we have all of these AI capabilities like cognitive services in Azure, and all of the other big clouds have their voice services too. You can easily integrate it into any kind of application. And yeah, I think it's a great part of it. You should not assume that people can interact with your objects somehow or go, and they should also be able to talk and say, click this or select this, which is a great way to make it more accessible. In terms of
100%.
haptics, yeah, haptics are so exciting. For those of you who doesn't know, haptics is a mechanism to give feedback to you. For example, there are lots of different haptic glows. So when you are seeing and trying to touch a virtual object like this house, you actually feel something in your hand. And one of the best experience that I had was this experience called Void. They have this whole Star Wars world, and you're wearing these vests, and whenever you got shot, like you feel it in different parts of your body, and it's so realistic. But it doesn't have to be very mechanical. Some of the haptic feedback is also heat or smell, for example. The experience is designed as a loop, although because you're in a virtual world, you have no idea. You keep going through the circle. You feel like you're really going through the set, the real world of Star Wars. But whenever there's a fire, they actually give you some heat, which makes the experience even more interesting. I loved it, but who knows what's going to happen to these kind of experiences with COVID.
Right. That makes sense.
Hopefully they'll survive.
That
Yeah.
makes sense. Okay. And by the way, I also want to add in. He says that loves your playground.
I'm sorry?
That she says that she loves your playground, the playground that you put together.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I'm glad it's helpful. Yeah, and this is a great way. Just going through the playgrounds and finding different examples is a great way to learn everything. And as you can see, there's this hidden thing, and you can actually search for examples, different examples. It's not working somehow right now, but also I'm using not the latest, but 4.2 because it's more stable. Maybe, okay, not today.
All right, that's fine. Okay, so
Yes.
so you've got the couple of houses, and then you can go in, import them, grab them by the specific name, and then go ahead and move them around.
Yes, and
Okay.
do other things too. So like this could be any kind of model. And if another good thing about like learning how to do things is just start writing. How's one? And I put a dot, or you could do also control space to see Babylon transform nodes absolute position vector tree, which is telling us a little bit about it. So it's the first thing, the absolute position, and then you can learn about these methods, right? And it tells me what kind of methods are available on this object, particular object. So this is a mesh object, model object, right? And if it was a different kind of object, sphere would have radius, a box wouldn't have that, so on and so forth. Every object has a different method.
Okay.
So it is super helpful. And let's talk about user interactions.
Yes.
So it is important that we interact, of course, and we can put triggers for clicks, and we can, change those to a mouse click versus touch, or if you are doing like hand interactions, you can have hand interaction there too. So in this particular one, we are adding an action manager, and we define the trigger, and we say what will happen to the box, source box position. So every time that event happens, we are adding a little bit to the X position and Y position. And then the other thing that happens is, this is like everything in web. This is the callback function for an event. This happens when the event happens. And we are randomly changing the color of the box. Let's see. So I'm clicking, and every time I click, it moves a little bit, and then it changes color on one direction.
Okay, that feels relatively natural to me as a web developer. That like you highlighted that callback. That's of course that's how we program everything. And just you set up an event handler and away you go. I dig it. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, beauty of the web. Yeah, so many things work similarly. You just have to learn some of the vocabulary about action manager is a object which has methods to help you build those things. So these kind of things are the difference. And also for things like VR and AR, there are few other ways to interact. For example, if you are not able to click or do something, you can interact with your eye gaze. So you can be looking at that box and then see kind of like a shoot a ray towards that object from my eyes, and then see if it's hitting some object, and that's how you choose it, which is interesting. And with lots of objects, and then you have to think about collisions too, like different objects might either pass through each other or like collide, and you might add some physics to it to make it act like real objects hitting each other, if that makes sense.
No, that makes a lot of sense.
Similarly, we have the drag event here. We can start with the drag, and this is an observable and then you can say on drag start do this, on drag while dragging do this other thing, and then when the drag ends do this other thing as well.
Okay.
This is
And observable is just a generic, hey, if this changes, then we're going to do something. And what I also then noticed is that you've got the drag and then the start and the end there, which again is still, that's very similar to how you would set up like a drag and drop event inside of just like a normal web app, is by using a very similar syntax. It's not observable, but it's that sort of that same thing of that drag, start, drag, end, and then identifying, okay, well, where's the mouse at that point?
Exactly. One tiny difference is hidden on this example actually, but might be on this one. So this is adding. Basically, we are moving from in two directions, right? On the x-axis in this case, but this is good for web. You can go up and down as well. But when you are thinking about a mixed reality event, there is a new axis, because if you can think of my glasses as my screen, I can also move in different ways, and it would move with that, which only means that you are defining, instead of XY position, you have XYZ position, and sometimes height as well. Well, I mean, rotation as well.
Is it also able then to pick up the accelerometer on the phone? So if I move the phone, that it could then adjust the object, or maybe adjust where my camera is, so I could use that to like look around the object.
Exactly. So whenever you are creating, well, you have the choice for phones, but it's best to put your camera on the very center of the world, and then anything that changes is being picked up from your camera um, is your point of view. So basically, you're moving your camera without having to write any code.
Okay.
Yeah. And rotation too. Like there are really interesting things that you can do. I'm sure you've seen, like you might have a game where you tilt your phone and an object would move.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. And so with again, Babylon has all of these really cool helper functions and creates everything as an object. So for mixed reality, AR or VR experiences, all we do is create default experience object it's an async object, and then depending on the capabilities or your choice, you give different different options for the experience. For example, if it's a AR experience, you can say use hand interaction. Actually, now come to think of it, Oculus have hand interaction on the VR too, so you can use that for both. But there are few different settings for AR and VR. Oh, one of them is, for example, being able to define surfaces. Because if I have an object and I want to be able to put it on my table, then I have to say that I want to be able to define the surfaces.
Okay.
That's what goes into some of these options. So once we add this tiny little code here, what this gives us is first it checks if we do have the capability on our device, what kind of a device we are in. And then it gives us this little glasses thing. So this is what we call a magic window to our immersive experience. So if you don't have a immersive capable device, you can either not render this, or you can just play with this and then still give the option to have a VR experience too.
Oh, okay. So if I happen to like have a device, I could now like pop this in, put this on my headset, and now I would see one 3D sphere there.
Yes. Mm-hmm. So what this is doing is rendering for two eyes, and that's how we in our brain connect these and see a 3D object.
Okay. That's cool. And that was only just like the one line of code to make that happen.
Yes. The basic experience with the very default, you just create default experience, but you do have more options to fine tune if you want to, but to make the very basic thing is really, really easy, which is really nice.
That's great. I dig it.
Yeah. Let's see. So in this one, we are, loading a scene from some other scene. So this is also very cool. So this experience is somewhere else, but we can just say like, take all of it, bring it in, and then make it a VR experience. This is a huge one, so it's going to take some time to load. One other thing is a little bit challenging is being able to test it on your device especially for like your phone. I can quickly show it, or should we move on to the like how some template projects that we have?
Let's do the template projects. I think that's like a perfect sort of a wrap to this. And I have to say, I really enjoyed you going through all of these different little options that are in that playground, because this is now something that anybody that's watching can go back and do on their own. I think that's fantastic. I love it.
Thank you. And if anybody has any feedback or anything they want to see, please do. You can do it on GitHub and create a issue for me. Sorry. One thing I forgot to do was to merge my latest. That's why I'm here.
Real developing going on right now.
Exactly. Exactly. This is Gitbook, so I have some limits there too. Okay. Look. Huh. Have I lost it? Oh God. Okay. So there are a bunch of great templates on GitHub. I'll show you on GitHub directly.
Okay.
I'll save the links there too. One of them I have is my talk from TSConf recently. Oh, okay. So this one, and this was created by another starter one, which is created by one of the contributors of BabylonJS. So what you do is when you create a new one, you can just use this as a template instead of starting from scratch. And looking at it, if you just search for the BabylonJS, there are Vue templates, there are Angular templates, here's the Vue, React, and then there's the ng templates. So there's no point trying to create it from scratch. You can if that's what you like. And there's a great documentation about how you can do that on the Babylon's website. But otherwise, start from one of these templates.
Okay.
And this is what you get is a TS config, because it's TypeScript. In this case, we have few rules that we are defining. One thing I've changed from Renan's template was the target ES 2017, because it covers 95% of the websites and the users, web users, and it's much faster. And the other thing is the Webpack configuration. So we have few scripts that we are running. Webpack developer, like how to build, all of that information is there. Additionally, one of the things that I add to this one is code spaces. If you haven't heard about code spaces, it's a way of running your thing on browser. You look very happy, Christopher.
I do. It's amazing. I've done like full demos with it. It's so fantastic. I love it.
Yeah, it's really cool. It's Visual Studio Code without having to worry about your local environment. For example, TypeScript is an issue, right? Like you have different versions of TypeScript. So in this one, you can just use whichever you want. So this is, let's see, I don't have to npm install because I see the node modules, and all I need to do is npm run start, which is defined on package.json, and it will run. Oops, error. Never mind.
That's okay. That happens to the best of us.
Yeah, oh well. Two things about this one. I added a Docker file which has the latest TypeScript and latest Node. And this dev container thing is really, really cool. I really like it, because the thing you can do about it is that you can choose which VS Code plugins that you want to use. So here I added BabylonJS Viewer. This takes BabylonJS 3D models, and then you can see it on your browser, on your editor, which is really cool. And the TypeScript stuff that I want to use only for this one, which is great because I have tons of plugins which I don't want them to run all the time and make my VS Code slower. So now I can pick and choose. And you can absolutely open this on your VS Code or VS Code Insider by going here. And it will download it, but it will still run it on a container on your local environment. So, which is really cool.
That's cool. That's perfect.
Yeah.
So Sean asked a question, and I think this is sort of like a perfect kind of point towards closing up. He asked the question, do I need any specific hardware to start with other than just, a laptop and a copy of Visual Studio Code?
Yeah, you don't even need a copy of Visual Studio Code if you have GitHub and code spaces. That's the cool thing. And in terms of devices, unfortunately, iOS devices are not supporting WebXR currently, but they absolutely will. But there's a workaround there too, which is called WebXR Viewer iOS. So Mozilla created this, so you can view things in WebXR, but I'm not sure like how hard it is to develop for. Other than that, all you need is the browser, and one other Chrome dev tool, which is super helpful, is WebXR. So even though you don't have a headset, you can choose different headsets over here. And as you can see, you can rotate it and like look up and down and things like that. So this is really helpful for development purposes. And 3JS has its own inspector as well.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
That's very cool. I dig it. Cool. All right. Well, then, what would you recommend as like a good starting project for somebody? Just go through that amazing playground that you've created and just work through that.
Yes, and also BabylonJS has its own tutorials, which is, I think the basic tutorial they have is they're creating a whole town or city or something like that, and then turning it into a game. And think about something simple, either follow that or think about something very simple for yourself to do. Yeah, and do it. Most of the time, what happens is that people want to do these really ambitious projects, and they get discouraged. I don't want you to get discouraged. Just show something. Maybe I think of IKEA application where you can show a chair on your own room or things like that. These are very simple and good introductions to WebXR.
I love it. I love it. Ashigu, thank you so much for coming on and highlighting BabylonJS. That I hope everybody else that walkthrough of the playground, because what you did for me is you made this feel much more approachable. That anytime that I think about
awesome.
3D and I think about like mixed reality, it's this big, scary, daunting thing. And so just having you kind of walk through all of those samples, like, oh, you know what? I think I can actually do this. So that was fantastic. Thank you so much for coming on.
I'm so glad to hear, and thank you for your amazing questions, and I can't wait to see what you build with it. And please ping me on Twitter or GitHub somewhere and share what you build.
Yeah, and our Twitter handles are right here on the screen. Let's see if I can't point in the right direction. There we go. There we go. Perfect. All right. Well, thank you again, and thank you for everybody for tuning in to a Web Wednesday. And we're here every week talking about really cool web dev things with some amazing people. So thank you again for joining. Thank you again to everybody else for tuning in, and enjoy the rest of your Wednesday. So bye.
Bye.